Welcome, dear listener, to another tranquil journey through the annals of history on Boring History for Sleep. Tonight, we delve into the quiet world of 15th century mapmakers and the enigmatic charts they crafted. Stories of ink-stained patience, exploration myths, and the unassuming lives of those who sketch the edges of the known world. Settle in. Let your eyelids grow heavy and allow your mind to drift as we explore the forgotten corners of the past. Imagine yourself in a dimly lit room, the soft flicker of a candle casting long shadows. As we begin our gentle voyage, imagine yourself in a modest workshop, tucked away in a bustling European city like Venice or Lisbon during the 1400s. The air is thick with the faint, earthy scent of aged parchment and the sharp tang of fresh ink derived from oak galls and iron salts. As a mapmaker, or cartographer, as you might be called in Latin tongues, your days unfold in a rhythm of meticulous labor, far removed from the grand adventures your maps inspire. Yours is a life of quiet precision, bent over tables laden with vellum, sheepskin stretched thin and smooth to a creamy surface, where every line demands unwavering focus. The tools of your trade are simple yet exacting. In one hand, you hold a quill, its feather tip carefully split and sharpened with a small knife, dipped repeatedly into a horn inkwell. The ink flows slowly, dark and viscous, staining your fingers with persistent black smudges that no amount of scrubbing fully removes. Beside you lies a compass for drawing circles, a straight-edged ruler carved from wood or bone, and perhaps a set of dividers to measure distances with mathematical accuracy. These instruments, often handmade or passed down from mentors, guide your hand as you translate travelers' tales, ancient texts, and rudimentary surveys into coherent worlds on paper. But it is the light, or rather the lack of it, that defines your daily toil and slowly erodes your vision. Natural daylight filters through narrow windows, perhaps glazed with oil paper or thin horn panes that diffuse the sun's rays into a hazy glow. On overcast days, or as evening creeps in, you rely on candles made from tallow or beeswax, their flames sputtering softly and casting a warm but unsteady amber light. Hour after hour, you hunch forward, your eyes straining to discern the finest details. The curling outline of a coastline, the minute script labeling distant ports, or the intricate hatching that denotes mountains and forests. The parchment before you is vast, sometimes spanning several feet, requiring you to lean in close, your breath stirring the surface as you work. This constant squinting takes its toll. The dim illumination forces your pupils to dilate unnaturally, leading to a persistent ache behind your eyes, a dull throb that builds like the slow accumulation of ink on a page. Over time, the fine work blurs the boundaries of your sight. What begins as mild fatigue evolves into a chronic strain, where distant horizons, ironically, the very subject of your maps, grow hazy in your own view. Spectacles, rudimentary lenses held in wire frames, might offer some relief if you're fortunate enough to afford them from Italian glassmakers, but they are crude, magnifying unevenly and often causing their own distortions. Many mapmakers, lacking such luxuries, simply endure, their vision fading like an old chart exposed to too much sun. Your routine begins at dawn, when the first light allows the most accurate rendering of colors, azures for seas, verdant green for lands, and golds for embellished borders. Breakfast is sparse. A hunk of bread, perhaps cheese or dried fruit, eaten at your workbench to maximize the fleeting hours of good light. As the morning progresses, you consult your sources, dog-eared copies of Ptolemy's Geographia, revived from ancient Greek origins, or reports from merchants who sailed the Mediterranean or ventured along African coasts. These accounts are fragmentary, riddled with exaggerations. A sailor speaks of a river that twists like a serpent, another of islands shrouded in perpetual mist. You must sift through them, imagining lands you've never seen, piecing together a mosaic from hearsay and hypothesis. Lunch offers a brief respite, a simple meal of porridge or stew shared with apprentices in the workshop's corner. Conversation drifts to the latest news, rumors of Portuguese explorers pushing southward or the Ottoman threats in the east. But it's subdued, focused on the craft rather than excitement. Afternoons stretch into repetition, tracing grids of latitude and longitude, a system borrowed from antiquity and refined in monastic libraries. You inscribe tiny letters with a steady hand, each character no larger than a grain of rice, spelling out names like terra incognita for the vast unknowns. Errors are costly. A misplaced line means scraping the parchment with a pumice stone, risking tears in the delicate material. As dusk falls, the candles multiply, their smoke curling lazily upward, mingling with the workshop's ambient odors of glue and pigments ground from minerals, lapis lazuli for deep blues, ochre for earthen tones. The flame's flicker dances across the page, creating illusions that force you to pause and rub your eyes, feeling the grit of fatigue. Night deepens the isolation. While the city outside hums with tavern songs and cartwheels, you persist, driven by commissions from navigators, princes, or scholars. A single map might take weeks or months. Each day a cycle of bending, peering, and correcting, the rhythm of your life echoing the steady scratch of quill on skin. Yet, amidst this ocular ordeal, there are moments of subtle satisfaction. The completed map, rolled carefully and sealed with wax, represents not just geography, but a quiet conquest of uncertainty. It might guide a ship safely to port or adorn a noble's library, a testament to your unseen labors. Still, the price is etched in your gaze, eyes reddened, lids heavy, a constant reminder of the toll exacted by charting the world's secrets from afar.
Imagine yourself now, dear listener, drifting across the vast, restless expanse of the Atlantic, where the horizon blurs into a haze of sea and sky. In the 15th century, the maps you might consult, those painstakingly crafted by candlelight, often bore a curious name. Hy Brasil, a phantom island said to lie somewhere west of Ireland, cloaked in mist and mystery. As you settle deeper into your pillow, let the gentle rhythm of this tale carry you, like a ship gliding through calm waters, into a story of elusive lands that flickered in and out of existence on the charts of old. Hy Brasil first appeared in the 14th century, its name scrawled on nautical charts with an air of cautious certainty. Picture a mapmaker, quill in hand, hunched over his parchment, transcribing tales from Irish sailors who spoke of a circular isle, rich with forests and shimmering streams, visible only once every 7 years before vanishing beneath the waves or into a fog that no ship could pierce. The name itself possibly derived from the Gaelic Ui Breasail, a clan name meaning descendants of Breasail, or perhaps linked to the Portuguese word for glowing embers, Brazil, suggested a place of otherworldly allure. It was a land of plenty in a world where hunger and hardship were constant companions, a beacon of hope for those who sailed beyond the known. The island's depiction varied with each map. On some, it was a perfect circle, adorned with a single castle at its heart, a nod to legends of a utopian realm ruled by a benevolent king. Others marked it with jagged cliffs or verdant hills, its shores dotted with imagined harbors. The Catalan Atlas of 1375, a masterpiece of medieval cartography, placed Hy Brasil confidently among other islands, its gold leaf catching the candlelight as if to mirror the island's rumored radiance. Yet, no two maps agreed on its precise location, and none could confirm its existence. Sailors returned with stories, glimpses of green slopes through parting mists, or strange lights dancing on the water, but never with proof. The island remained a whisper, a dream etched in ink. As you imagine yourself aboard a creaking caravel, the salt air cool against your skin, consider the lives of those who sought Hy Brasil. Navigators like John Cabot, sailing under the English crown in the late 15th century, may have chased its shadow, hoping to claim a paradise for their patrons. Their ships, small and sturdy, bobbed through storms and glassy calms, guided by crude compasses and the stars' faint glow. The crew, clad in woolen tunics damp with spray, shared tales of the island during long nights, a land where rivers ran with sweet water, where fruit hung heavy on every tree, and where no man knew want. These stories, passed from port to port, fueled the courage to sail farther, even as the ocean stretched endlessly before them. But Hy Brasil was not merely a sailor's fancy. It held a deeper place in the medieval mind, woven into the tapestry of myth and faith. The Irish monks, in their stone monasteries perched on windswept cliffs, spoke of sacred isles like the Island of the Blessed, a Christian echo of pagan Edens. Hy Brasil, with its 7-year cycle of visibility, mirrored these spiritual tales, suggesting a divine rhythm to its appearances, as if God himself veiled it from unworthy eyes. Scholars in Bologna or Paris poring over manuscripts, debated whether it was a remnant of Atlantis or a terrestrial paradise, their quills scratching as they wove it into treatises on geography and theology. Yet, the island's persistence on maps was not without consequence. Its allure drew explorers into perilous waters, where jagged rocks and sudden squalls claimed lives with quiet indifference. The ocean, vast and unyielding, swallowed ships whole, leaving only ripples to mark their passage. Families in coastal villages waited for sons and husbands who never returned, their hopes pinned on a land that might never have been. The maps, with their elegant lines and Latin inscriptions, offered no apologies for these losses, their beauty belying the dangers they inspired. By the 16th century, as exploration expanded and instruments grew more precise, High Brazil began to fade from charts. Cartographers, now armed with better measurements and first-hand accounts, relegated it to the realm of legend, its circular form replaced by more tangible discoveries. Yet, even into the 19th century, it lingered on some maps, a stubborn ghost of a world not fully known. Expeditions as late as 1872 sought it, their crews scanning the horizon for a glimpse of that elusive shore, only to find waves and wind. The island, like a half-remembered dream, slipped further into the fog of history.
Let your thoughts wander now, dear listener, to the sun-drenched shores of the Ottoman Empire in the early 16th century, where the scent of spices from distant markets mingles with the salty breeze off the Bosporus. Here, in the year 1513, an admiral named Piri Reis, whose full name, Ahmed Muhyiddin Piri, echoes to the corridors of history, compiled a world map that would puzzle scholars for centuries to come. As you relax in the quiet flow of this narrative, imagine the soft rustle of gazelle-skin parchment under skilled hands, and allow the enigma of this chart to unfold gently, like waves lapping at an unseen coast. Piri Reis was no ordinary mapmaker. He was a seasoned navigator and cartographer, born around 1465 in the port city of Gallipoli, where the calls of seabirds and the creak of ship timbers formed the backdrop of his youth. Rising through the ranks of the Ottoman Navy, he participated in campaigns across the Mediterranean, capturing details of coastlines and harbors with a keen eye. His map, drawn in the imperial workshops of Constantinople, now Istanbul, was not born from solitary toil, but from a vast synthesis of knowledge. He drew upon some 20 source maps, including those from Portuguese explorers, ancient Greek geographers like Ptolemy, and even chart seas from captured vessels. The air in his workspace would have been heavy with the aroma of drying inks and the faint mustiness of old scrolls, unrolled carefully on long tables bathed in the golden light of oil lamps. The surviving fragment of the Piri Reis map, discovered in 1929 amid the dusty archives of the Topkapi Palace, measures about 2 feet by 3, its surface adorned with elegant calligraphy in Arabic script and vivid illustrations in reds, greens, and golds. Picture it unfurl before you. The Western Hemisphere takes shape with remarkable accuracy for its time. The bulging curve of South America, the jagged inlets of the Caribbean, and the eastern bulge of Africa, all render with flowing lines that suggest a deep understanding of projection techniques. Marginal notes, penned in Piri's own hand, explain his methods, referencing Columbus's voyages and other accounts, as if inviting the viewer into a quiet conversation across ages. Yet, it is the southern edge of the map that invites the deepest contemplation. There, a landmass stretches eastward from the tip of South America, its coastline traced with what appears to be uncanny precision, resembling the ice-free shores of Antarctica, a continent not officially sighted until 1820 by Russian explorers. Imagine the mapmaker's quill hovering over this section, dipping into ink pots to delineate mountains and rivers in a land shrouded by perpetual cold, far beyond the reach of 16th century sails. Some have pondered whether this depiction hints at lost knowledge from antiquity, perhaps maps from Phoenician or Egyptian voyages, preserved in the libraries of Alexandria before their flames consumed them. Others suggest it might reflect indigenous accounts from the Americas, whispered to European ears and woven into the cartographic fabric. The rhythm of speculation surrounding the map is steady and unhurried, much like the turning of pages in a forgotten tome. Theories abound in scholarly circles. Could it show Queen Maud Land without its glacial veil, implying a warmer era charted by ancient mariners? Or is it a misalignment, The coast of Patagonia extended imaginatively to fill the void of the unknown. Pyre himself noted the challenges of his sources. Conflicting scales, vague descriptions. Yet his compilation stands as a testament to the quiet ambition of blending old and new worlds. No dramatic revelations here. Only the subtle interplay of fact and fancy, where the map's accuracy in known regions contrasts with the mysteries of its fringes. In the daily life of Pyre Reese, such work was interspersed with the demands of naval duty. Mornings might find him aboard a galley, the deck swaying gently underfoot as he sketched harbors from direct observation, the sun warming the wooden rails. Afternoons returned him to the palace ateliers, where apprentices ground pigments from lapis and vermilion, their mortars emitting a soft grinding sound that blended with the distant muezzin's call. Meals were simple, flatbreads, olives, and figs, eaten amid discussions of winds and currents, the conversations flowing as steadily as the ink from his pen. The map's creation spanned months, each day a cycle of measuring, erasing, and refining, the parchment absorbing the faint impressions of his tools. The map's legacy extends beyond its lines. It survived wars and empires, tucked away in imperial collections, its secrets waiting patiently for rediscovery. When it emerged in the 20th century, it sparked quiet debates among historians and geographers who pored over its details in well-lit libraries, far removed from the candlelit strains of its origin. Some interpretations venture into the realm of the improbable, echoes of advanced civilizations or extraterrestrial guidance, but these are mere whispers, easily set aside in favor of the map's grounded achievements. A bridge between East and West, a record of humanity's slow expansion across the seas.
Picture yourself, dear listener, in the grand palazzo of a Renaissance noble in Florence or Mantua, where the air carries the subtle fragrance of polished marble and aged leather bindings, and sunlight filters through tall windows draped in heavy velvet. In the 15th and 16th centuries, maps transcended their practical origins, becoming coveted symbols of status, much like a fine tapestry or a jeweled goblet. For a nobleman, perhaps a duke or a wealthy merchant elevated to aristocracy, collecting these charts was a quiet pursuit of prestige, a way to display one's connection to the wider world without ever leaving the comfort of one's estate. As you let your mind settle into this scene, allow the steady rhythm of daily opulence to envelop you, contrasting the ink-stained labors of the mapmakers we've encountered. The noble's day begins in the soft light of morning, as servants draw back curtains to reveal gardens manicured with geometric precision, echoing the grids on the maps he admires. Breakfast is a leisurely affair. Fresh fruits from orchards, breads baked in the household ovens, and perhaps a goblet of watered wine, served on silver platters in a chamber adorned with frescoes of classical myths. Conversation with family or advisors might touch on the latest arrivals from afar, spices from the Indies or silks from the Levant, prompting thoughts of the maps that chart such routes. The noble, dressed in embroidered doublets of fine wool or silk, moves with deliberate grace, his steps echoing on tiled floors as he makes his way to the studiolo, a private study designed for contemplation and display. This studiolo is the heart of his collection, a room lined with oak cabinets and shelves, where maps are stored rolled in protective cases or framed under glass to preserve their delicate hues. Imagine him unlocking a drawer with a key from his belt, unfurling a large porthole on chart, a nautical map crisscrossed with rum lines, its coasts outlined in meticulous black and red inks. Such a piece, commissioned from a master cartographer in Genoa or Antwerp, might cost as much as a small estate, its value derived not just from utility, but from rarity. The noble traces his finger along the depicted shores, murmuring names like Cathay or Cipangu, lands he knows only through reports, yet claims a vicarious mastery over by possession. Collecting was a methodical endeavor, woven into the fabric of social life. Correspondence with agents in distant cities, Venice, Lisbon, or Seville, fills his afternoons, letters sealed with wax bearing his crest, requesting the latest editions or rarities captured from rival powers. A map from the workshop of Abraham Ortelius, for instance, with its ornate borders featuring mythical creatures and coats of arms, arrives wrapped in oilcloth, its arrival announced by a courier's soft knock. The noble inspects it carefully, noting the precision of engravings, the subtle watercolor washes denoting terrains, greens for fertile plains, browns for arid deserts. Ownership of such items signals worldly sophistication. In an era when knowledge of geography implies influence over trade and politics, a well-stocked map cabinet whispers of alliances and ambitions. Evenings bring opportunities to showcase the collection. During banquets in the Grand Sala, where candles and crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over tables laden with roasted meats, cheeses, and pastries, the noble might lead select guests to his studiolo. The air thickens with the scent of beeswax and herbs scattered on the floor for freshness as he unrolls a world map, perhaps one inspired by Ptolemy, but updated with new world discoveries. Guests, fellow nobles, scholars, or diplomats lean in, their murmurs of admiration filling the room like a gentle hum. "See here the Indies," he might say, his voice measured and assured, pointing to regions shaded in imperial colors. These displays are subtle assertions of power. In a time of shifting alliances and emerging empires, maps represent not just land but leverage, a quiet reminder of one's place in the grand scheme. Yet, this pursuit is not without its rhythms of maintenance and reflection. Mornings after such gatherings find the noble alone, perhaps with a trusted scribe. Cataloging acquisitions in leather-bound ledgers, the quills scratch a familiar echo of the mapmaker's own labors. Dust is brushed away with soft cloths, and faded inks are noted for restoration by skilled artisans. The collection grows incrementally. A globe from Nuremberg, its brass fittings gleaming, or a set of celestial charts mapping the stars above unknown seas. In quieter moments, as rain patters against leaded panes, he contemplates the blanks on these maps, the terra incognita that mirror the uncertainties of courtly life, where fortunes rise and fall with the tides of favor. The contrast with the common folk is implicit, yet profound. While peasants till fields under the same sun, their world bounded by village horizons, the noble's maps expand his domain imaginatively, a luxury afforded by wealth from rents, trade, or patronage. No strenuous voyages for him. Instead, the thrill comes from possession, the maps serving as trophies in a game of status, where knowledge is currency and display is art. As seasons turn, spring blossoms giving way to autumn harvests, the collection endures, a testament to enduring legacy, passed to heirs who will add their own layers of ink and ambition.
As our tranquil exploration of 15th century mapmakers and their enigmatic worlds draws to a gentle close, dear listener, let your mind linger on the quiet patience that defined their era, the steady scratch of quills on parchment, the flickering candlelight that illuminated unknown horizons, and the subtle allure of phantom lands and mysterious charts. From the strained eyes of the cartographer in his dimly lit workshop to the opulent displays in a noble studiolo, we've wandered through lives bound by ink and imagination, with a rhythm of daily toil intertwined with dreams of distant shores. Reflect softly on how these maps, born of hearsay and hypothesis, bridge the gap between the known and the unseen, guiding ships through uncharted waters while adorning walls as symbols of quiet power. The phantom island of High Brazil vanishing into mist like a half-forgotten memory, and the puzzling lines of the Pyrie Reis map, hinting at lost knowledge, remind us of history's gentle enigmas, questions that linger without demanding answers, allowing the mind to drift freely. In contrast to those times, when the world unfolded slowly on fragile vellum, you rest now in the comfort of the present, where maps are summoned with a touch and mysteries unfold at your leisure. Let the weight of the day slip away, like ink drying on an ancient page, and allow sleep to claim you gently. Good night, and may your dreams chart peaceful paths through the night.
Welcome, dear listener, to another tranquil journey through the annals of history on Boring History for Sleep. Tonight, we wander the ancient trade routes of the Sahara, where survival intertwined with commerce, and the harsh whisper of the desert shaped the lives of those who crossed its vast expanse. Imagine yourself settling into a comfortable position, perhaps under a soft blanket, as we explore the theme of trade routes, survival culture, and the luxury that awaited at the end of the road. Let the steady rhythm of these stories carry you gently toward rest, with no rush, no excitement, just the quiet unfolding of the past. Close your eyes if you wish, and allow your mind to drift across the sands as we begin. Imagine yourself in the heart of the Sahara Desert, centuries ago. where the sun hangs heavy in the sky like an unyielding sentinel, casting its relentless gaze upon the endless sea of dunes. You are a water-bearer in a caravan, one of the countless souls tasked with ensuring the survival of merchants, camels, and fellow travelers on journeys that could stretch for weeks or even months. This role, essential yet unforgiving, formed the backbone of trade across North Africa, connecting distant empires with goods like salt, gold, and spices. But beneath the surface of this vital duty lay a quiet, persistent hardship, a life defined by the rhythm of scarcity, heat, and unceasing vigilance. As a water-bearer, your day begins before dawn, when the air still holds a faint chill from the night. You rise from your simple mat, woven from palm fibers and spread across the cooling sand, to inspect the waterskins, those leather pouches, often made from goat hides, that hold the caravan's most precious cargo. These skins, sealed with resin and wax to prevent leaks, are your constant companions, slung across the backs of camels or carried on your own shoulders. Feel the weight of them, heavy and sloshing faintly as you lift them, knowing that a single tear in the material could spell disaster for everyone. The fear of leakage is ever present, a subtle undercurrent in your thoughts, as the desert's dry winds work tirelessly to evaporate any exposed moisture. The caravan assembles in the dim light, a line of perhaps 50 or 100 camels, their humps swaying gently as they are loaded with bales of cloth, blocks of salt, or ingots of gold wrapped in protective hides. You, the water-bearer, walk among them, distributing sips from your skins to the animals first. They are the engines of the journey, capable of enduring days without drink, but relying on you to ration wisely. The camels' soft grunts and the shuffle of their padded feet on the sand create a soothing, repetitive cadence, like the distant roll of waves on a shore you've never seen. But as the sun climbs higher, the heat builds, wrapping around you like a thick blanket, drawing sweat from your skin that evaporates almost instantly, leaving a salty residue. Walking beside the caravan, your feet sink into the fine grains of sand, which shift and give way with each step, demanding extra effort from weary muscles. The dunes rise and fall around you, undulating forms that stretch to the horizon, their surfaces rippled by the wind like frozen waves. Hot gusts carry fine particles that sting your eyes and cling to your robes, woven from coarse wool or cotton to shield against the sun's rays. You wrap a tagelmust, a long strip of indigo-dyed cloth, around your head and face, its deep blue hue fading over time from the relentless exposure. The fabric provides some relief, filtering the air you breathe, but it also traps the warmth, creating a personal cocoon of discomfort. Thirst is your constant shadow, a gentle reminder rather than a sharp pang, managed through careful sips from a personal gourd. You know the signs of dehydration all too well, the dryness in your mouth, the subtle fatigue that creeps into your limbs. Yet you must prioritize the group's needs. At midday, when the sun beats down with full force, the caravan halts in the scant shade of a rocky outcrop or beneath a makeshift tent of stretched hides. Here, you dole out water rations, a measured cup for each traveler, enough to sustain but never to satisfy fully. The liquid, warmed by the heat, tastes faintly of leather and earth, a far cry from the cool springs of oases you've left behind. As the afternoon wears on, the real torture reveals itself in the monotony and the isolation. The landscape offers little variety, dune after dune, interrupted only by the occasional thorny acacia tree or the skeletal remains of a long-abandoned well. Mirages dance on the horizon, shimmering pools of illusory water that tease the eye, a cruel trick of light and heat. You press on, your steps falling into a rhythmic plod, the caravan's bells tinkling softly from the camels' necks, a lullaby against the silence. But beneath this calm lies the awareness of peril. Sandstorms could arise suddenly, blotting out the sky with swirling grains that choke the air and bury supplies. In such moments, you huddle with the group, covering the water skins to protect them, feeling the winds howl as it tugs at your coverings. Nights bring a stark contrast, a brief respite that underscores the day's hardships. As the sun dips below the dunes, painting the sky in soft hues of orange and purple, the temperature plummets, turning the sand cold beneath your feet. You gather around a small fire fueled by dry camel dung, its smoke carrying the acrid scent of survival. Water is heated for a simple meal, perhaps millet porridge or dates softened in the liquid, shared in quiet conversation. Stories are exchanged in low voices, tales of past journeys, of oases discovered or lost, of caravans that vanished into the sands. As a water bearer, you listen while tending to your duties, refilling skins from the dwindling supply, calculating the days until the next known water source. Yet this role is not without its quiet rewards, woven into the fabric of endurance. The stars overhead form a vast canopy, brighter than in any settled land, offering a sense of connection to something larger. You learn the constellations used for navigation, guiding the caravan by the steady light of the North Star. Bonds form among the travelers, merchants from distant cities, nomads familiar with the routes, guards with their curved swords at the ready. Trust is paramount. A water bearer's honesty ensures fairness, preventing disputes that could fracture the group. Still, the toll accumulates over time. Blisters form on hands from handling rough ropes and skins. Calluses thicken on feet from endless walking. The body adapts, but the mind must contend with the isolation, the knowledge that a miscalculation, a leak undetected, a storm too fierce, could lead to dire consequences. Lives have been lost in these expanses, entire caravans succumbing to the desert's indifference, their bones eventually claimed by the shifting sands. You acknowledge this reality with a detached resolve, focusing on the next step, the next ration, the rhythm of survival. As weeks blend into one another, the approach to an oasis brings a subtle shift. Date palms swaying gently, their fronds rustling like whispers. Wells, dug deep into the earth, offer replenishment, the cool water a balm against parched throats. Here, you refill the skins, mending anywhere with fresh seals, preparing for the journey ahead. But even in these havens, vigilance persists. Water sources can dry up, or rival groups may contest them, leading to tense negotiations rather than conflict.
Picture the Sahara not as an empty wasteland, but as a tapestry of routes, etched by centuries of travelers who linked the lush savannas of West Africa with the Mediterranean world. From the 6th century onward, the gold and salt trade formed the economic heartbeat of empires like Ghana, Mali, and Songhai, transforming dusty outposts into thriving hubs of commerce. These routes, stretching thousands of miles, were lifelines of exchange, carrying not just goods but ideas, cultures, and fates across the dunes. The rhythm of this trade was steady, unhurried, yet relentless, a cycle of preparation, journey, and return that shaped the lives of countless souls. Salt, a commodity we might take for granted today, was as precious as gold in this era, its value rooted in survival. In the humid, tropical region south of Sahara, where heat and sweat drained the body's reserves, salt was essential to life, preserving food and sustaining health. It came primarily from the desert itself, mined from ancient, dried-up lake beds in places like Tagaza or Tadeni. Imagine the miners, their hands roughened by labor, hacking at slabs of salt beneath a blistering sun. These slabs, often cut into heavy blocks, were loaded onto camels, sometimes as many as 40 tied together in a single caravan. Each block wrapped in cloth to protect it from elements. The weight of the salt pressed into the camels' backs, their hooves sinking slightly into the sand as they began their trek southward. Gold, the other pillar of this trade, flowed from the forests and rivers of West Africa, particularly from the regions around the Senegal and Niger rivers. The Wanyara people, skilled gold traders, worked the alluvial deposits, sifting through riverbeds for nuggets and dust that gleamed like captured sunlight. This gold was not just currency, but a symbol of power, molded into ornaments, coins, or bars for trade. Merchants from the north, often Berber or Arab traders, brought their own goods, cloth, beads, copper, and even manuscripts, to exchange this coveted metal. The meeting of these worlds, north and south, created markets like Timbuktu and Gao, where the air buzzed with the clink of metal scales and the rustle of goods changing hands. The caravans that carried these treasures were feats of organization, often numbering in the hundreds or even thousands. Picture a line of camels stretching across the dunes, their bells tinkling softly, accompanied by warriors armed with spears and curved swords, their eyes scanning the horizon for bandits or rival traders. These guards, often Tuareg or Fulani, were not just protectors but navigators, reading the stars and the subtle shifts in the dunes to guide the caravan to its destination. The merchants themselves, draped in flowing robes, were shrewd negotiators, their wealth measured not just in goods, but in their reputation for reliability. Trust was the currency of the desert, as a broken promise could strand a caravan or ruin a trader's name. The journey itself was a delicate balance of endurance and calculation. A typical caravan might travel 15 to 20 miles a day, moving in the cooler hours of dawn and dusk to avoid the midday heat. Rest stops were planned around oases or wells, where water-bearers, weary from their own burdens, ensured the group's survival. The camels, marvels of adaptation, could carry up to 400 pounds each, their humps storing fat to sustain them through lean stretches. Yet, even these hardy creatures relied on careful management, their loads adjusted to prevent exhaustion. The caravan's pace was set by its slowest members, creating a rhythm that felt almost meditative. The sway of the animals, the creak of leather, the soft crunch of sand underfoot. The trade's impact rippled far beyond the desert. In the northern cities of Fez and Marrakesh, West African gold fueled markets and mosques, its luster adorning the courts of sultans. In the south, salt transformed diets and economies, enabling communities to preserve fish or meat for lean seasons. But this exchange was not without its shadows. The labor of mining salt was grueling, often performed by enslaved workers who toiled in unbearable conditions, their lives spent extracting the desert's wealth. Similarly, gold mining relied on backbreaking effort. With entire villages dedicated to the task, their prosperity tied to the whims of distant markets. These realities, though harsh, were part of the trade's foundation, a reminder of the human cost beneath the flow of riches. Cultural exchange flourished alongside commerce. As caravans moved, they carried Islam southward, its teachings spreading through traders and scholars who settled in market towns. Mosques and madrasas rose in places like Jen, their mud brick walls blending with the landscape. Manuscripts, written in elegant Arabic script, circulated alongside goods, preserving knowledge of astronomy, law, and poetry. Imagine a scholar in Timbuktu, his fingers stained with ink, copying text by lamplight as the desert night enfolds the city. These exchanges enriched both sides, creating a shared heritage that spanned continents. Yet, the trade was not immune to disruption. Shifts in political power, like the rise and fall of empires, could reroute paths or dry up markets. Banditry posed a constant threat, with raiders emerging from the dunes to seize goods or demand tribute. Environmental changes, too, played a role. Oases could vanish as water tables shifted, forcing caravans to adapt or perish. Despite these challenges, the trade endured for centuries, its resilience a testament to human ingenuity and the desert's strange allure. As we leave the gold and salt trade, with its caravans winding to the sands, let's turn our gaze to one of its forgotten jewels. The lost city of Wadon, a once thriving hub now half buried in the desert's embrace. Its walls, weathered by time, still whisper the wealth that passed through its gates, inviting us to explore its mysteries next.
Nestled in the Adjar Plateau of present-day Mauritania, Wadon emerges from the dunes like a mirage made real, its origins tracing back to the 11th century. Founded as Iksar, a fortified village by Berber traders, it grew into a crucial stop on the trans-Saharan routes, where caravans laden with gold, salt, and slaves paused to rest and replenish. The city's name, derived from Arabic words meaning two wadis, hints at its life-giving feature. Seasonal riverbeds that funneled precious water during rare rains, sustaining date palms and small gardens amid the aridity. Picture the walls of Wadon, built from local stone and mud brick, rising modestly against the horizon, their surfaces weathered to a soft, earthy tone that blends seamlessly with the surrounding sands. Life in Wadon revolved around the rhythm of arriving and departing caravans, a steady pulse that brought vitality to its narrow streets. Merchants from the north, their robes dusted with sand, would unload goods in the central marketplace, an open square shaded by acacia trees, where the air carried the mingled scents of spices, leather, and camel musk. Here, negotiations unfolded in hushed tones, with scales balancing nuggets of gold against slabs of salt, while scribes recorded transactions on parchment under the dim light of oil lamps. The city's inhabitants, a mix of Berber nomads and settled farmers, tended to their roles with quiet diligence. Blacksmiths forging tools from imported iron, weavers crafting cloth from wool sheared in distant oases, and water bearers, familiar from our earlier tales, drawing from deep wells lined with stone to quench the thirst of man and beast alike. The architecture of Wadon reflects its dual nature as both refuge and hub. Houses clustered tightly within the walls, their flat roofs connected by ladders, forming a labyrinthine network that offered shade and community. Imagine stepping into one such home, its interior cool despite the outer heat, with floors of packed earth and walls adorned with simple geometric patterns etched in plaster. Families gathered around low tables for meals of couscous and dates, flavored with herbs grown in terraced plots irrigated by cannons. Underground channels that captured groundwater from afar. Mosques dotted the city, their minarets modest yet elegant, calling the faithful to prayer with voices that echoed softly across the plateau. The largest, built in the 15th century, featured intricate carvings around its doorways, symbols of the Islamic faith that had taken root through the trade networks. Yet, Wadon's prosperity was always tempered by the desert's whims. Sandstorms, rising without warning, would blanket the city in fine grains, infiltrating every crevice and demanding endless sweeping from rooftops and alleys. Water remained a precious commodity, rationed carefully during dry spells, with communal wells guarded to prevent overuse. The threat of raiders loomed, drawn by tales of wealth passing through. Thus, the city's walls were reinforced over time, watchtowers added to scan the endless dunes for approaching dust clouds. In times of strife, the population would retreat inward, barring gates and relying on stored provisions, grains in earthen silos, dates dried in the sun, to endure sieges that could last weeks. Archaeological whispers reveal layers of Wadon's history, buried beneath the sands that now encroach upon its ruins. Excavations have uncovered pottery shards from distant lands, beads of glass and agate traded from the Mediterranean, and coins minted in far-off mints, all testifying to its role in the gold and salt trade. The city's decline began in the 16th century, as trade routes shifted westward toward the Atlantic coast, lured by European ships offering new paths for commerce. Gradually, caravans bypassed Wadon, leaving its markets quieter, its wells less frequented. Inhabitants drifted away, seeking livelihoods elsewhere, while the desert advanced, burying streets and homes under drifting dunes. Today, what remains is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, its partially restored structures standing as silent guardians of a bygone era. Wandering the ruins now, one might trace the outlines of ancient homes, their doorways framing views of the endless desert. The wind, ever present, carries fine sand that polishes stone smooth, erasing details with patient persistence. Yet, in this abandonment lies a serene beauty, a place where time slows, inviting reflection on the impermanence of human endeavors. Artifacts like rusted keys or fragments of manuscripts, occasionally unearthed by shifting sands, hint at personal stories. A trader's ledger noting a profitable exchange, or a scholar's notes on astronomy observed from the clear night skies. The culture of Wadon, preserved in oral traditions and surviving architecture, speaks of a resilient people attuned to their environment. Festivals once marked the arrival of major caravans, with music from stringed instruments and rhythmic drumming filling the air, though always in moderation to conserve energy in the heat. Knowledge passed through generations, navigation by stars, herbal remedies for ailments born of the desert, and the art of bargaining that turned scarcity into sustenance. Even in decline, these threads endured, woven into the fabric of nearby communities that still echo Wadon's legacy. As we linger in the shadows of Wadon's walls, half-buried and whispering of forgotten wealth, let us shift our gaze to a figure who embodied the pinnacle of this trade's opulence. Mansa Musa, the Emperor of Mali, whose pilgrimage caravan astonished the medieval world with its splendor. Imagine the procession unfolding across the sands, a moving tapestry of gold, musicians, and servants, as we explore this journey next.
In the early 14th century, the Mali Empire stretched across West Africa. It's well drawn from the gold mines that fed the trans-Saharan trade. Mansa Musa, ascending the throne around 1312, was not only a sovereign but a devout Muslim, compelled by faith to undertake the Hajj, a pilgrimage to the holy city of Mecca. This journey, spanning over 4,000 miles round trip, was no solitary endeavor, but a massive expedition that reflected the empire's opulence and the emperor's piety. Picture the caravan assembling in Niani, the capital, amid groves of baobab trees and the gentle flow of the Niger River, where preparations unfolded over months with a calm, methodical pace. The caravan scale was immense, comprising perhaps 60,000 souls. Courtiers in fine robes, scholars carrying scrolls of knowledge, merchants with goods for trade, and a retinue of servants and enslaved individuals who tended to the daily needs. At its core were 12,000 personal attendants for the emperor, dressed in silks imported from distant lands, their presence a testament to Mali's prosperity. Camels, numbering in the thousands, bore the loads, sturdy beasts selected for their endurance, their humps rounded with stored sustenance. Each day began with a call to prayer, the voices of muezzins rising softly in the pre-dawn light, setting a rhythm of devotion that permeated the travel. Musa Musa himself traveled in relative comfort, atop a camel or within a shaded litter carried by bearers, his position elevated to survey the procession. His attire, a flowing robe of Persian silk embroidered with gold thread, caught the light as the caravan moved, a subtle symbol of authority. Surrounding him were heralds and standard-bearers, waving banners of green and gold, while musicians played lutes and drums in measured tempos, their melodies drifting across the dunes like a soothing breeze. The air carried the faint scent of incense burned in portable braziers, mingling with the earthy aroma of the camels and the occasional whiff of blooming desert flowers after a rare rain. Gold was the caravan's defining feature, transported in vast quantities. Some accounts speak of 100 camels each laden with 300 pounds of the metal, formed into staffs or dust for distribution. This wealth was not hoarded but shared generously along the route, given as alms to the poor or gifts to local rulers, a practice rooted in Islamic charity. In Cairo, where the caravan paused for months, Musa Musa's largesse flooded the markets, temporarily altering the value of gold and leaving merchants in quiet awe. Yet, this display was handled with restraint. The distributions organized by scribes who noted each transaction in ledgers, ensuring order amid abundance. The journey's hardships, though mitigated by status, echoed those of ordinary caravans. The desert's heat pressed upon the group, with midday halts under vast tents woven from goat hair, providing pools of shade where water was rationed from skins maintained by dedicated bearers. Meals were communal yet hierarchical. The emperor dined on dishes of rice, millet, and spice meats prepared by cooks, while others partook of simpler fare like dates and dried fish. Rest stops at oases allowed for replenishment, the palms rustling overhead as baths were drawn from wells, offering brief respite from the dust that clung to skin and cloth. Security was paramount, with 500 armed guards, archers and spearmen, flanking the caravan, their vigilance a quiet undercurrent against potential threats from nomads or bandits. These warriors, loyal to the Musa, camped in orderly formations, their fires dotting the night like scattered stars. The enslaved members, numbering in the thousands and often acquired through trade or conquest, performed much of the labor, tending animals, erecting tents, and carrying burdens. Their lives, bound to the expedition's needs, added a layer of complexity to the journey, a reminder of the era's social structures where freedom varied by circumstance. As the caravan crossed the Sahara, it encountered diverse landscapes, the rolling dunes giving way to rocky plateaus, then to the fertile Nile Valley. In each region, interactions unfolded, diplomatic exchanges with sultans, scholarly discussions in mosques, and cultural minglings that enriched Mali's knowledge of the wider world. Upon reaching Mecca, the pilgrimage's climax, Musa Musa performed the rituals with humility, circling the Kaaba amid throngs of pilgrims, the city's minarets casting long shadows in the evening light. The return trip, laden with new goods like books and architects invited to Mali, mirrored the outbound path but with a sense of fulfillment. This has not only satisfied religious duty but elevated Mali's prestige. Maps of the time soon marking the empire with golden illustrations. Yet, for those in the caravan, it was a prolonged exercise in endurance, the days blending into a tapestry of movement and pause. The emperor's travel, luxurious by contrast to the water-bearer's toil, still demanded adaptation to the desert's indifference, where every oasis was a quiet victory. As Munsum Moose's grand procession recedes into the annals of time, let us draw our journey to a close, reflecting on the threads that connect these tales. The harsh survival of the desert, the flow of trade, the mysteries of lost cities, and the splendor of imperial voyages, all woven into the vast fabric of history.
As our exploration of the Sahara's trade routes draws to a gentle close, let us pause to reflect on the tapestry we've woven, the quiet tortures of the water-bearer, enduring the desert's embrace, the steady flow of gold and salt that connected distant worlds, the whispering ruins of Wadon, half reclaimed by the sands, and the opulent pilgrimage of Mansa Musa, a journey of faith and fortune that echoed across continents. These stories, bound by themes of survival, commerce, and fleeting luxury, remind us of the resilience woven into human history, a rhythm of hardship and reward that shaped civilizations long past. Imagine yourself now, far removed from those endless dunes, nestled in the soft comforts of the present. The harsh winds and scorching sun are but distant memories, replaced by the gentle hush of your surroundings. As the weight of the day lifts, allow your thoughts to drift like grains of sand in a calm breeze, carrying you toward peaceful slumber. Thank you for joining this serene voyage through time on boring history for sleep. Rest well, and may your dreams be as vast and tranquil as the desert night sky. Settle in. The day is winding down, the light outside is fading, and the world around you begins to soften into quiet. Tonight, we will take a long, slow journey back in time, to a place where the air was thick with coal dust, and the rhythm of life was dictated by the turning of wheels deep underground. Our destination is 19th century Wales, during the height of Britain's Industrial Revolution, a time when coal was the beating heart of progress, fueling factories, ships, and locomotives. It was an era of immense change, when whole valleys became devoted to the extraction of this black stone, and communities grew in the shadow of towering slag heaps and tall pithead frames. But behind the story of economic expansion and technological marvels lies another truth, the quiet, constant hardship of those who labored in the mines. Their lives were shaped by darkness, by cramped passageways, and by an ever-present awareness that the earth above could shift at any moment. In the hours ahead, we will move through 4 chapters of this world. First, we will descend into the tunnels with the miners themselves to see, smell, and feel the rhythm of their days. Then, we will follow the story of the Senginid disaster, the single worst mining accident in British history. From there, we will explore the folklore and ghost stories that still drift through these valleys, carried in whispers and in the wind. And finally, we will step through the doors of a coal owner's mansion to see the stark contrast between those who profited from the industry and those who endured it. For now, make yourself comfortable. Let the sound of the past flow around you, steady and unhurried, as we step into the first part of our journey, the daily life of a Welsh coal miner in the 19th century. Imagine the first thing you feel in the morning is not sunlight, but dampness. You wake in a small, low-ceilinged cottage, the air faintly scented with smoke from last night's fire and the faint mineral tang that always clings to your clothes. Outside, the hills are still cloaked in early mist, and in the dim light, you can already see the tall wooden frame of the pithead, its wheels turning slowly, creaking with the first shifts of the day. If you are a miner here, in a small Welsh valley town, you do not walk far to work. The pit is often just beyond your doorstep. The ground underfoot is soft with coal dust, which clings to boots and trousers, even before you've begun your shift. The air is cool now, but you know it will grow warmer and heavier the deeper you go. The descent begins with a ride in a cage, a rattling, open-sided lift that lowers you into the shaft. The light above quickly shrinks to a pale circle, and soon, there's only the steady groan of machinery and the faint drip of water trickling down the timbers. At the bottom, the air feels different, thicker, still, with the faint, constant taste of coal dust at the back of the throat. You might be one of the younger boys, perhaps 10 or 12 years old, working as a trapper, sitting alone for hours in the dark, opening and closing a small wooden door to control the flow of air in the tunnels. Your job is simple but vital. Without it, The dangerous gases that gather in these mines could build to lethal levels. There's no lamp beside you. Light is expensive, and the owners do not waste it where it is not strictly needed. So you sit in the dark, listening to the sound of footsteps, the rumble of carts, and the occasional cough echoing from down the tunnel. Older men work in the narrow seams, lying on their sides with a pick, chipping away at the cold face. The space is so tight you cannot fully straighten your back. The air is warm here, humid from the earth's breath, and lit only by small oil lamps hooked to the wooden supports. Every so often, there is a distant thud, the sound of rocks shifting somewhere above, a reminder that the ground you work under is not entirely still. At times, the tunnels are filled with the scent of damp wood and the faint bitterness of oil smoke. Your hands are constantly dusted black, the lines in your skin permanently darkened. The coal gets into everything: hair, eyelashes, even the creases of your eyelids. Meals are short and simple: bread, cheese, maybe some cold tea. You eat with your back against the tunnel wall, your lamp casting a small halo of light that fades quickly into the surrounding dark. Shifts are long. 10, 12, even 14 hours can pass between your arrival at the pit head and the moment you return to the surface. When you finally emerge, the daylight feels almost strange, too bright, too sharp, after so many hours underground. Your clothes are heavy with dust, your throat dry, your body aching. And tomorrow, you will do it again. This rhythm of descent, labor, and return is the heartbeat of your life. The mine shapes not only your days, but the life of the whole valley. The bells, the machinery, the smell of smoke from the coke ovens on the hillside. Here, in the shadow of the pit head, everything revolves around the coal. And yet, above ground, there are moments of ordinary life. Children running between rows of cottages, women hanging washing in the thin sunlight, the clink of mugs in a public house at the end of a long day. But the dark tunnels are always there, waiting for you. And the next morning, you will descend again, into the quiet, pressing weight of the earth. The year is 1913, and in the quiet valleys of South Wales, the coal industry has reached its peak. The small town of Senginid sits in the Aber Valley, its streets lined with rows of gray stone terraces, their slate roofs glistening when the rain sweeps in from the hills. Here, the Universal Colliery is the heartbeat of the community. Nearly every man in the town works there, and for many, so do their sons, brothers, or fathers. It is the early morning of the 14th of October. The air outside is crisp, and there's the faint scent of smoke from morning fires. The pithead machinery groans into motion, lowering men into the earth. It is the beginning of another day that should have been much like any other. But deep underground, conditions are never entirely safe. In the coal seams, there's always the possibility of danger. Gases invisible to the eye. Pockets of dust that can hang in the air like mist. By mid-morning, that danger becomes reality. A sudden explosion rips through the tunnels. Not the sharp crack of a single blast, but a rolling, heavy wave that shakes the ground above. It begins in one part of the seam, where coal dust and gas ignite together, and spread swiftly, carried along by the very air meant to keep the mine breathable. Up on the surface, there's confusion at first. Some say they heard a deep rumble. Others felt a tremor in the ground. Then the truth becomes clear. Something has gone terribly wrong. Smoke begins to rise from the shaft. The cage that brings men to the surface rattles with urgency, hauling up those who can still move. Some emerge coughing and blackened, their eyes wide with shock. Others are carried up, motionless, wrapped hastily in rough cloth. The rescue efforts begin almost at once. Men from nearby pits come running, their faces still gray with coal dust from their own shifts. They carry lamps, picks, and stretchers, and they descend into the mine knowing full well the risk. After an explosion, the air below is often filled with afterdamp, a lethal mix of gases left in the blast's wake. The work is slow. Timbers have been thrown aside, rails bent, and wagons overturned by the force of the blast. Rescuers call out into the dark, listening for any reply. Sometimes they hear faint tapping or voices, and hurry to dig through the debris. Other times, there is only silence. By the end of the day, the scale of the disaster is clear. Hundreds of men and boys have not returned. The town is hushed, its streets filled with small clusters of people waiting, watching the pit head, hoping to see a familiar figure emerge. In total, 439 lives are lost, making it the worst mining disaster in British history. Nearly every family in Senginid loses someone. For some, it is a father and two sons. For others, a husband, a brother, and a cousin. The grief is woven into the fabric of the community. In the weeks that follow, funerals wind slowly through the valley, black coats and hats moving in the cold autumn air. The pit stands silent for a time, but it is never truly abandoned. Repairs are made, machinery is mended, and eventually, the work resumes, for coal is still needed, and the men who remain still have families to feed. Years later, questions will be asked about safety, about why ventilation was poor, why coal dust had been allowed to build, why warnings had been ignored. But in the quiet valleys of Wales, such questions often fade beneath the pressing weight of survival. Work is dangerous, and always has been. The mine takes lives, but it also gives wages. And so the wheels turn again. The Senginid disaster becomes part of the valley's memory, a story told in low voices, remembered in photographs, etched on stone memorials. And for those who descend into the mines each day, it is a shadow that follows them underground, a reminder that the earth beneath their feet can change in a moment. When the day's work is done and the lamps are extinguished, the valleys grow quiet. The faint clatter from the pithead machinery fades into stillness, and the narrow streets are lit only by the pale glow from cottage windows. In this stillness, stories begin to stir, stories told in hushed voices, over mugs of tea or pints of ale, about the things that linger in the shadows of the Welsh mining towns. Every community seems to have its own tales. Some are rooted in memory, the faces of those who went down into the earth and never returned. Others are older, drawn from the deep well of Welsh folklore, where spirits, omens, and unseen presences move quietly through the hills. In some valleys, miners speak of a figure called the knocker. It is said that before a collapse or an accident, strange tapping sounds can be heard in the tunnels. Not the natural groans of the earth, but deliberate knocks, as though from an unseen hammer on stone. Some believe it is a warning, a way to urge the living to leave before it is too late. Others say it is simply the restless work of spirits who once labored here themselves, still carrying their picks in the dark. There are also stories of the Canwyll Corph, the corpse candle, a pale, flickering light that moves slowly along a path or across a hillside. If a miner sees it, it is said to foretell the death of someone nearby, tracing the route that the funeral procession will take. The light drifts on without sound, vanishing into the night. Many of these stories find their way into quiet conversations at the colliery, especially during long shifts in the dark. A boy might hear his grandfather speak of a voice that called to him underground when no one else was there, or of a sudden drop in temperature that swept through a tunnel moments before an accident. The mine is a place where the boundary between the known and the unknown feels thin. The flicker of a lamp in the corner of your vision can be enough to make you pause, to listen, to wonder. Even above ground, certain places hold an uneasy reputation. A patch of woodland where no birds sing, an abandoned drift mine where the air smells faintly of smoke, even years after the last fire was put out. The crumbling remains of cottages that were left empty after a disaster, their walls slowly being claimed by ivy and moss. For some, these are just tales, a way of giving shape to the dangers of mining life, a way of remembering those lost. But for others, the stories hold weight. They walk a little faster past the old entrances at night. They avoid looking too closely at the hillsides where the corpse candle is said to appear. Folklore has a way of folding into daily life here. It becomes part of the landscape, as familiar as the winding terrace streets, the sound of the chapel bell on a Sunday, the coal smoke curling from chimneys in winter. And so, even in a place built on the most physical and tangible of labors, there's room for mystery, room for the unseen miners who knock in warning, for lights that drift where no lamp is carried, for voices that echo in the dark long after their owners are gone. A short walk from the terraces where miners live, the streets change. The rows of stone cottages give way to larger houses, set back from the road, with iron gates and long gravel drives. At the top of one such drive stands the home of the mine owner, a place built not from sweat and dust, but from the profits drawn from deep underground. The house itself is large, though not ostentatious by the standards of great cities. Its stone walls are clean, its windows tall, its roof capped with slate cut from the same hills that rise over the valley. Inside, the floors are polished wood, softened by thick rugs. The air is warmer here than in most homes, a steady coal fire burning in each room. The faint scent of beeswax polish lingers on the banister rails. In the drawing room, heavy curtains frame the windows, muting the daylight. Oil paintings line the walls, landscapes, portraits, and the occasional ship at sea. A clock ticks softly on the mantelpiece, measuring the hours between breakfast and dinner. Life in such a house moves at a different pace. Breakfast is a quiet affair, served on china plates, the tea poured from a silver pot. The talk at the table might turn to the latest market prices for coal, to the possibility of expanding the workings into a new seam, or to the arrangements for an upcoming social event. Letters arrive in the Morning Post, written on thick paper, bearing the crests of banks, suppliers, and other industrialists. The owner may visit the pit during the day, but he does not descend into it. Instead, he stands near the office, consulting with the managers, perhaps walking the yard to inspect machinery or review shipments. His boots remain clean, his clothes untouched by dust. From here, the pit is a place of figures and output, of tons extracted and contracts signed. The noise of the cages and winding engines is a distant hum, not the deafening roar it becomes underground. In the afternoons, the house is calm. Perhaps there is a visitor, another mine owner from a neighboring valley, or a local politician seeking support. They sit in high-backed chairs by the fire, their voices low, the conversation measured and deliberate. Outside, the lawns are trimmed, the hedges clipped. The kitchen garden is neatly ordered, its paths graveled, its beds marked with wooden stakes naming the vegetables and herbs. Evenings are more formal. A servant carries in the lamps, setting them on tables so that the golden light falls across the room. Dinner is served in several courses, the cutlery polished, the wine decanted. Afterwards, there may be music played on the piano, or simply a retreat to the study, where the owner leafs through newspapers and account books in the quiet. From the windows of this house, the slag heaps are visible on the hillsides, and at night, the glow from the coke ovens can be seen faintly against the sky. But here, the sounds of the mine are softened, the air free from the grit and dust that settles in the valley below. The contrast is sharp, a world where coal is a source of comfort and warmth, not labor and risk. And yet, the two worlds are bound together, each depending on the other. Without the men in the tunnels, there would be no wealth to fill this house. Without the wealth, there would be no wages to draw the men below. In the quiet of the drawing room, perhaps the mine owner reflects on this balance. Or perhaps he does not. For in this world, the mine is both distant and near unseen, but always present, shaping every life in the valley in ways that cannot be ignored. We have moved slowly tonight, through the narrow tunnels and the wide valleys, through the dark of the mine and the soft lamplight of the drawing room. We have stood with the miners at the start of their long day, felt the weight of the earth above them, and walked home again in the pale afternoon light. We have paused at Singanit, in the shadow of its greatest tragedy, and felt the stillness that follows loss. We have listened to the stories that drift through these hills, whispers of unseen figures, lights in the night, and voices that echo long after their owners are gone. And we have stepped into the quiet halls of a mine owner's mansion, where life is shaped by the same coal, but in a world far removed from the dust and the danger. The valleys of 19th century Wales were places of industry and of community, of hardship and of resilience. The rhythm of life here was bound to the coal, its extraction, its transport, its sale. Every cough in the cold night air, every blackened fingernail, every polished silver candlestick in the dining room was, in some way, a mark left by the mines. Now, as the machinery falls silent and the day draws to a close, the valley settles into rest. The cottages are lit from within, small golden squares in the darkness. The pithead frame is a shadow against the sky, its wheels still at last. Somewhere a coal fire burns low, its glow fading to embers. Settle yourself in. Let your body rest in whatever position feels most comfortable, and let the present moment loosen its grip. We're about to drift, not just in thought, but in time, back to an age when the sea was both a livelihood and a hazard, a realm of mystery and risk that called to the bold and the desperate. In the 19th century, humanity's curiosity was beginning to push beneath the ocean surface, not with sleek submarines or lightweight wetsuits, but with heavy, cumbersome contraptions, early diving suits that were as much prison as protection. This journey will be told in 4 chapters. We'll begin by stepping into the lead-weighted boots of a 19th century diver, feeling the cold press of the sea around us and the steady hiss of air pumped from far above. Then we'll follow a decades-long quest to recover treasure from a doomed ship called the Lutine. From there, we'll move further back in time, to the sunlit waters of the Mediterranean, where divers stumbled upon the preserved remains of ships lost thousands of years before. And finally, we'll rise to the surface and walk ashore into the refined, carefully choreographed leisure of Victorian admirals, far removed from the icy depths below. For now, though, breathe steadily and imagine yourself about to take that first, slow descent into a world almost entirely unknown to those who walk the land. Imagine yourself standing on the deck of a wooden salvage vessel, its timbers creaking in the morning swell. The horizon is a muted gray, and the air carries that particular tang of salt mixed with damp rope and oiled brass. Before you, laid out on the planks, is the diving gear. It is not sleek or lightweight. It is a collection of stiff canvas, heavy brass fittings, and a helmet so large and so solid it might as well have been forged for a statue. The suit itself is thick, made of multiple layers of waterproof canvas, stiffened and patched from repeated use. Its fabric feels coarse and unyielding, almost like the hide of some great beast. You step into it clumsily, one leg at a time, as crewmen help to pull the material up around your torso. The boots are not merely footwear, they are weights. Solid-soled and reinforced with lead, they are designed to keep you from floating away once you are beneath the surface. Each one is so heavy that simply lifting your foot feels like an effort. Then comes the helmet. It is copper and brass, polished to a dull sheen by countless dives, and it smells faintly metallic inside. The glass ports are thick and slightly fogged, narrowing your vision to a small, forward-facing window on the world. Once lowered into place, the helmet locks you into a small, echoing chamber where your own breathing becomes the dominant sound. You will not be carrying your own air. Instead, a long, ribbed hose connects your helmet to a pump on the surface, where 1 or 2 men will work cranks to force air down to you. It is a lifeline, quite literally. If it kinks, tears, or detaches, your air supply will stop within moments. As you shuffle to the edge of the boat, you feel the combined weight of the gear, nearly 80 kilograms, pressing down on your shoulders. On land, it makes you clumsy. Underwater, it will pin you firmly to the seabed. The crew helps you over the side, and the water rises slowly up the suit. It seeps coolly around your legs first, then your torso, until finally you are beneath the surface. The light changes instantly. From the open brightness of the deck, you now look out through a dim, greenish haze. Tiny particles drift past your helmet glass like motes of dust in an attic. Your descent is slow, controlled by the weights on your body and the pull of the hose. Each step downward into the gloom takes effort, your boots sinking into the soft silt below. Above you, the faint shimmer of daylight recedes. And here is where the discomfort truly begins. The water is cold, always cold, no matter the season. Your suit holds back the chill only a little, and soon the dampness creeps in. The pressure of the water presses against your chest and ears, a constant, heavy embrace. Every movement is laborious. If you want to turn, you must shift your entire body, for your helmet does not move with your head. Breathing is steady but mechanical. Each inhale a soft hiss from the hose. Each exhale a muffled bubble slipping out into the surrounding darkness. There is no sound from the surface. The world here is muted, reduced to the steady noise of your own life support and the faint, dull thuds of tools or anchors above. And yet, the real strain is not the weight or the cold. It is the knowledge that you are utterly dependent on the men above. A misstep, a tangle of the hose, a sudden current pulling you into wreckage, any of these could cut you off from air. The work itself is far from glamorous. You might be tasked with recovering timbers, hauling chains, or searching blindly through silt for some small object. All of it must be done slowly, awkwardly, while the sea presses in from every side. Even in shallow depths, there's a sense of isolation, an awareness that you are in a place humans were not built to be. The cold grows deeper in your bones, and the minutes feel stretched and heavy. When at last you signal to be hauled up, the ascent is no quicker than the descent. Breaking the surface feels almost unreal, the sunlight too bright, the air too quick in your lungs. The helmet is lifted away, and the ordinary world rushes back in. The sound of gulls, the slap of waves, the chatter of the crew. You feel lighter, but exhausted, and you know you will do it again tomorrow. For in the 19th century, diving was not an adventure for the curious. It was a job for the hardy, the desperate, or those chasing the promise of something valuable in the depths. The year was 1799 when HMS Latine, a frigate of the Royal Navy, set sail from Great Yarmouth, bound for the port of Hamburg. Her mission was both political and financial, to carry a shipment of gold bullion intended to stabilize the European economy during a time of war and unrest. But she never arrived. Somewhere off the treacherous coast of the Netherlands, in the shallow yet dangerous waters of the West Frisian Islands, the Lutine met her end. Accounts suggest that the ship struck a sandbank in poor weather, the waves breaking over her deck until her timbers could bear no more. In the chaos, the cargo, worth an enormous sum, sank with her, vanishing into the silty seabed. For decades afterward, the wreck lay hidden beneath shifting sands and murky currents. But gold, even when lost, exerts a kind of gravitational pull on human ambition. By the 19th century, with diving technology advancing just enough to make the attempt possible, salvagers began to dream of bringing the treasure back to the surface. Picture, if you will, a salvage vessel anchored in the shallow waters near the Dutch coast. The tide is low, the water restless. Men in heavy diving suits, like the one we imagined earlier, prepare for the slow, uncertain work of searching through the wreck. But the Lutine is not lying neatly on the seabed. She is broken into pieces, her timbers scattered and buried under decades of sand. Visibility is almost non-existent. Divers can see only what lies within arm's reach. The method of searching is simple but exhausting. Feel through the sediment with gloved hands, lifting out any object that seems out of place. Wood, rope, fragments of metal. Occasionally, there are finds. A section of carved timber, still faintly showing the decorative lines of the ship's stern. A rusted cannon, its barrel sealed with concretion. Even coins, tarnished, green with corrosion, surface from the mud. But these are hints, not hoards. The gold remained elusive. Season after season, salvage operations returned, often backed by investors eager for a share of the treasure. Some expeditions were little more than hopeful ventures in fair weather. Others involved careful mapping of the wreck site, marking where finds were made in the hope of triangulating the location of the main cargo hold. The work was slow. Storms would undo months of effort in a single night, shifting sandbanks so that a familiar search area was once again buried meters deep. In such moments, the wreck seemed less like an object to be found and more like something alive, sliding, hiding, moving at its own will. And then there were the dangers. The West Frisian waters, though not deep, are notorious for their currents. A diver could be pulled off his feet, his air hose stretching taut, the surface crew straining to pull him back. In some seasons, sudden squalls forced the salvage vessel to retreat, leaving work unfinished. Over the years, some gold had come up, small quantities, coins and bars here and there, enough to prove the treasure was real but never enough to satisfy the investor's dreams. Each recovery seemed to renew the belief that the rest was close, just beyond reach. The Lutine's bell, recovered in the mid-19th century, became a symbol of her story. It now hangs in Lloyd's of London, where it is still traditionally struck to announce news, once for bad, twice for good. In the quiet of the salvage decks, when divers came up empty-handed, one imagines the bell's single chime ringing faintly in the mind, a reminder that fortune is fickle, and the sea does not easily give up what it has taken. The search for the Lutine spanned generations, and though parts of her cargo were eventually recovered in the 20th century, the greater part of the treasure remains, if the stories are true, still buried beneath the sand, guarded by the tides. It is a fitting reminder that beneath the waves, Human ambition is matched only by the patience of the sea. The Mediterranean has always been a crossroads, a meeting place of traders, soldiers, and explorers for thousands of years. Its waters have carried ships heavy with grain from Egypt, amphorae filled with oil and wine from Greece, and coins minted in the great cities of Rome. And inevitably, it has claimed many of those ships for itself. Imagine, for a moment, a coastline of pale limestone cliffs, sunlight spilling over the water in slow, rippling patterns. Beneath that bright surface lies a different world, quieter, cooler, where fragments of human history rest in the sand as if in a museum without walls. For centuries, these wrecks lay undisturbed, their timbers and cargo hidden under layers of silt and seagrass. It was only in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, as diving equipment improved, that explorers began to discover what the sea had preserved. One such find might begin innocently. A fisherman lowering his net in waters he has known since childhood. When he hauls it in, tangled among the lines is a clay jar, its shape unfamiliar, its surface stained by centuries underwater. Word travels quickly. Soon, divers arrive, lowering themselves into the depths to see where it came from. Down below, the first impression is of shapes half hidden in the sand. An amphora's curved neck, the handle of another, a broken shard glinting faintly. They are often lying just as they were packed centuries before, stacked in neat rows within the hold of a vessel that no longer exists, but would long since eaten away by sea creatures. The amphorae themselves tell stories. Some still hold hardened resin that once sealed in wine. Others carry the faint scent of ancient olive oil, released only when the clay is broken after its long sleep. In certain places, coins have been found scattered among the debris. They are worn and darkened, but the impressions remain. Faces of emperors, symbols of cities, dates that anchor them in time. Each one is a survivor, having lain in darkness for hundreds or even thousands of years before being touched again by human hands. Sometimes the finds are larger, almost startling in their preservation. A bronze statue, its features softened by corrosion but still recognizably human, lying on its side as though merely resting. Marble columns, their fluting intact, toppled as if from a deck during a sudden storm. The preservation here is aided by the particular nature of the Mediterranean seabed. Where the silt is thick, it blankets the wrecks completely, protecting them from the currents and from living creatures that would otherwise consume them. To uncover a wreck often means carefully brushing away centuries of accumulated sand, revealing a shape that has not seen sunlight since antiquity. Dives to such sites are slow, almost meditative. The diver moves deliberately, mindful not to disturb too much at once. The water carries a faint haze, and each object uncovered emerges gradually, as if reluctant to leave its resting place. In this way, the Mediterranean has given back fragments of its past in small, careful offerings. A coin here, a jar there, a carved object whose maker's name is lost. Each find adds a thread to the vast tapestry of history, weaving together trade routes, cultural exchanges, and human ambitions that spanned the ancient world. And when the divers rise once more to the surface, blinking against the sudden brightness, the quiet knowledge lingers. Beneath those calm, sunlit waves, whole chapters of history remain, waiting for the patient hand that will someday find them. After months or years at sea, Victorian admirals returning to shore stepped into a world carefully arranged for comfort. The damp, salt-soaked air of the open ocean was replaced by the still, warm quiet of drawing rooms and club halls. Here, the rhythm of life slowed, not to the roll of the waves, but to the measured tick of a mantel clock and the steady murmur of polite conversation. Many admirals kept apartments or houses in the naval towns, Portsmouth, Plymouth, or along the genteel terraces of London's West End. Their homes were furnished with a mix of naval souvenirs and fashionable Victorian comforts. A brass telescope might sit beside a velvet armchair. A framed chart of the Pacific could hang above a fireplace, where coal burned with a dry, even heat. Social life often centered around the naval clubs. These were places of polished wood and high ceilings, where the air was scented faintly with tobacco and the wax of freshly polished floors. Admirals might be found seated in deep leather chairs, a glass of port or brandy within easy reach, discussing ship movements, promotions, or the slow progress of Parliament. Imported cigars were a particular pleasure. They arrived in cedar-lined boxes, each cigar wrapped in paper to keep its scent intact. The ritual of lighting one, selecting it carefully, cutting the end, drawing the first smoke, was part of the enjoyment. It was a taste of foreign ports, brought home without the discomforts of travel. Evenings could be leisurely affairs. A dinner at the club might begin with a soup, clear and simple, followed by roasted meats, accompanied by potatoes and seasonal vegetables. Conversation would flow easily, but without haste, often returning to familiar topics. Old campaigns, the merits of particular ships, or the abilities of younger officers rising through the ranks. Beyond the clubs, some admirals kept private gardens. These were tended carefully, with neatly clipped hedges and paths laid out for gentle walks. They were spaces for reflection, a contrast to the boundless, restless ocean. The rustle of leaves and the scent of flowers carried none of the urgency of a ship under sail. And yet, even in these quiet moments, the sea was never far from their thoughts. Many kept a study or a library where logbooks and charts were stored. A map might remain spread out on a desk, a paperweight holding down one curling corner. From time to time, a visitor might find the admiral tracing a familiar route with his finger, recalling a voyage taken decades earlier. The contrast was striking. The open sea, where the wind dictated every movement, and the shore, where the pace could be set by the turning of pages in a book. In these years ashore, admirals lived within routines of comfort and familiarity, but the habits of a lifetime at sea, order, punctuality, attention to detail, remained quietly in place. The Victorian admiral's shore life was not a retreat from his profession, but a continuation of it in a different setting, one where the elements were tamed, the food came hot to the table, and the nights were free from the sound of the watch bell and the call of the boatswain's whistle. And so, we leave behind the world beneath the waves, from the heavy, air-fed helmets of the 19th century diver to the endless, patient search for the lutine's elusive gold, from the sunlit silence of ancient Mediterranean wrecks to the polished drawing rooms where Victorian admirals passed their days ashore. Each chapter has been a glimpse into lives shaped by the sea, sometimes in hardship, sometimes in comfort, always in connection to that vast, shifting boundary between land and water. It is easy, from the safety of the present, to imagine the past as distant and untouchable. But in truth, the same winds that filled the sails of those old ships still sweep across the oceans today. The same tides that buried wrecks centuries ago still rise and fall, hour by hour, just beyond our sight. The people we've met in these stories, divers, sailors, admirals, lived in rhythms dictated by those tides. Their days began and ended not with the clock, but with the shifting sky, the changing light, the call of the sea. Even when they returned to land, those rhythms stayed within them. As you listen now, perhaps in the quiet of your own space, the sounds of that life are far away. The hiss of air in a diver's helmet, the muted thud of boots on the seabed, the gentle creak of a ship at anchor, the low murmur of voices in a clubroom. They belong to another time, and yet they also linger here, in memory, in imagination. History is not only dates and events, it is the texture of daily life, the feel of the air, the weight of the work, the comfort of familiar surroundings. It is these quiet details that survive in our minds, long after the great moments have passed. Let the sea grow still now in your thoughts. Let the images fade, like the last glimmers of sunlight slipping beneath the horizon. The waters are calm, the ship is secure, and the shore is not far away. Rest, knowing that the past remains where it is, safe, distant, and softly quiet. Close your eyes for a moment and picture the sound of water, not the wild crash of ocean surf, but the steady lap of a tide against stone, the low creak of wooden piers, the muted splash of oars dipping in and out of a narrow canal. We are going to Venice, not the Venice of postcards and summer tourists, but the Venice of the late 1700s, a maritime republic past its peak, still rich with beauty and ceremony, but marked by shadows of decline. It was a city afloat, its streets made of water, its palaces rising straight from the lagoon. Here, daily life was defined by the rhythm of tides and the push of the gondolier's oar. The air often carried the scent of salt and damp stone, mixed with the faint perfume of the wealthy and the smoky tang from kitchens tucked into quiet courtyards. Over the course of our journey tonight, we will explore 4 aspects of life in this fading empire. First, we will step into the worn shoes of an 18th century gondolier, feeling the weight of his long days on the water. Then, we will slip behind the masks of the city's final great carnival, where pleasure and politics mingled under candlelight. We will drift below the surface of the lagoon to find treasures long hidden in the silt. And finally, we will follow a Venetian doge through a single day of ceremonial power and private routine. But for now, the canal is quiet and the gondola is waiting. Step aboard and we'll begin. The gondola rocks gently as you place a hand on its polished side. It is painted black, as all gondolas must be by law. The curved prow ornamented with a shining piece of metal that catches what little morning light filters through the mist. Beneath your feet, the planks are smooth from years of passengers stepping in and out, carrying everything from fine silks to baskets of fish fresh from the market. You take your place at the stern, one hand on the long wooden oar, the other steadying yourself against the slight sway. The morning air is damp and cool, the kind of cold that sinks in without wind or snow, born of the lagoon's breath and the salt of the Adriatic. In winter, a fog often rolls in, softening the edges of the buildings until they look like pale ghosts above the water. The work of a gondolier is constant, repetitive, and demanding. There is no engine here, only the long, rhythmic push and pull of the oar against the water, day after day. Your passengers are nobles, merchants, priests, or visiting dignitaries, and each expects a steady hand and a smooth ride. You are always in motion. A crossing might take you along the Grand Canal, its waters broad and busy, the sunlight reflecting in sharp patterns off the gilded windows of palaces. Or it might take you into the narrower side canals, where the walls seem close enough to touch, and your oar dips quietly into still, shadowed water. And while the work is physical, the real burden is the waiting. You wait at the water stairs outside a palace, leaning on your oar as hours pass, while your employer dines or negotiates inside. You cannot simply leave. You must be ready the moment they call, whether in full daylight or by the flicker of lanterns long after midnight. Privacy is rare. The gondola is an intimate space, but you are not part of the conversations that take place there. Whispered words in French or Venetian dialect reach your ears, whether you want them or not. Discussions of debts, affairs, or politics. You cannot repeat them, of course. A gondolier's reputation rests as much on silence as on skill. The elements are unkind. In summer, the sun strikes the water until the air shimmers with heat, and your clothes cling to your back with sweat. In autumn, the rains can soak you through before you reach the next landing. And always, there is the damp, settling into your bones, warping the wood of the gondola, rusting the iron rings on the mooring posts. Your pay depends on the generosity of your passengers and the agreements you've made with the household you serve. Some days you might be rewarded with a few extra coins or a leftover pastry from a fine table. Other days, the work feels endless and the earnings thin. Still, there is a kind of quiet pride in guiding the gondola smoothly around a crowded bend, avoiding the barges piled with vegetables from the islands or the small boats carrying goods from distant ports. It is a skill learned over years. The movement of your wrist is familiar to you as breathing. But as the evening falls and the lamps are lit along the canals, you know tomorrow will bring the same. Hours on the water, in heat or fog, carrying those whose lives are far more comfortable than your own. The city is beautiful, yes, but for the gondolier, it is a beauty always seen from the edge, always just out of reach. Carnival in Venice was more than a festival. It was a season when the city transformed itself. For weeks leading up to Lent, the rigid social structures of the Republic loosened, if only slightly, under the anonymity of the mask. It is evening now in our imagined Venice, sometime in the last decades of the 18th century. The sky over the lagoon is turning the color of faded silk, and lights are blooming in the windows of the palaces along the Grand Canal. The air carries a mixture of scents, salt from the water, wax from 1,000 candles, and the faint sweetness of perfumes worn beneath layers of heavy clothing. In the streets and squares, people move in slow streams. The masks are varied. Simple white bottom masks paired with tricorn hats, long-nosed plague doctor masks worn more for spectacle than function, and elaborate designs dusted with gold leaf and tiny feathers. Costumes shimmer in the lamplight, silk skirts brushing the cobblestones, brocade coats heavy with embroidery. Inside the palaces, the festivities are quieter in tone, but no less elaborate. Candles are set in tall candelabra, their flames reflecting in polished mirrors, so that the room seems twice as bright. The walls are hung with rich fabrics, and the floors shine with a waxed finish that catches the steps of dancers moving in measured time to the music. The music itself is soft, steady, violins and harpsichords weaving together in patterns that invite the mind to drift rather than race. Conversation hums gently in the background, in Italian, French, and the clipped tones of visiting diplomats. For some, the mask is a shield, allowing private meetings to take place unnoticed. A merchant might whisper a deal to a foreign trader. A noble might pass a folded note to someone they are not supposed to be seen with. The gondolas waiting outside are more than just transport. They are escape routes, ready to carry their passengers away along dark canals. And then there are the spies. The Venetian Republic, even in its later years, maintained a complex network of informants. Some wore masks like everyone else, their presence unnoticed in the crowd, their ears attuned to names, promises, and rumors. In these final decades, political tensions grew heavier. The Republic's power was waning, but its taste for secrecy had not faded. The carnival was also a stage for displays of wealth and status. A host might spend weeks preparing for a single evening, ordering rare wines from Dalmatian ports, arranging shipments of sugar for confections, commissioning a new set of glass chandeliers from the island of Murano. Guests might never see the kitchens or the quiet work of the servants, but they would feel the effect in the abundance laid before them. Outside, in the more crowded parts of the city, the celebration was rougher, but no less alive. Street performers balanced on stilts, jugglers tossed flaming torches, and masked revelers traded jokes in the narrow alleys. Here, the anonymity of the mask was a way to escape one's station, even if only for an evening. A fisherman could stand beside a noble woman, both hidden, both equal in their temporary invisibility. But behind the music and the glitter, there was an undercurrent of something else. This was, after all, the last great carnival era before Napoleon's forces would arrive and end the centuries-old republic. Though few could say when the change would come, the sense of an ending was in the air, felt in the longer glances, the lingering toasts, the quiet recognition that this world, with all its ceremony and secrecy, might not last much longer. For now, though, the night continues. The massed crowd drifts between palaces and plazas, the oars of gondolas stirring the black surface of the canals, and the air hums with the gentle promise of both pleasure and intrigue. Beneath the calm surface of the Venetian lagoon lies a world unseen. Its waters are shallow in places, shifting with the tides, and the light from above is filtered through silt and seaweed. For centuries, this lagoon has been both a barrier and a safeguard, a moat for the city, and a resting place for what the city has lost. Imagine the floor of the lagoon as a patchwork of sandbanks, muddy channels, and sunken timbers. Over time, storms have driven ships aground here. Some were humble fishing boats, others merchant vessels loaded with cargo from far-off ports, Dalmatian stone, Sicilian grain, fine cloth from the Levant. As the decades passed, these wrecks settled into the soft sediment. The wood darkened, sometimes dissolving into nothing more than a shadow in the sand. Yet certain things endure: metal, stone, and the sealed clay of amphory. Divers exploring the lagoon in the 18th and 19th centuries often worked in near blindness. Even today, the water can turn cloudy with a single movement of the hand, the fine mud rising in slow spirals that obscure everything. A diver might reach into that darkness and close his fingers around something cold, a bronze coin, still faintly showing the worn profile of a ruler, a fragment of marble, smooth and cool, carved by a hand long forgotten. Gold coins have been found here, scattered like seeds after the fall of a ship's strongbox. The edges are softened by time, but the weight remains, a reminder of the wealth that once passed through this maritime crossroads. Occasionally, an entire chest has been recovered, its wood rotted but the contents intact, the coin spilling out in a muted, heavy cascade. The lagoon has also hidden the remnants of Venice's own galleys, warships from the height of the Republic's power. Their keels rest in silence now, sometimes half buried, sometimes preserved almost completely where the oxygen-poor mud has kept them from decay. Fragments of weaponry remain: iron shot, broken sword hilts, corroded anchors. Marble statues, too, have been lifted from these waters. Some fell into the lagoon by accident. Others were deliberately discarded, perhaps damaged or replaced. When they are brought to the surface, the water streaming from them seems to blur the centuries, as if they had only just been set aside. There is something almost protective in the way the lagoon keeps these treasures. The mud seals them away, the currents shift around them, and the city above goes on, unaware of what rests just below. Only the divers, the fishermen snagging their nets, and the occasional archaeologist see these glimpses of the past. To walk through Venice is to see its history in stone and glass, but to dive beneath it is to touch a different kind of memory, one shaped by loss, accident, and the slow patience of water. The treasures beneath the lagoon are not arranged in neat displays. They lie as they fell, as they were abandoned, as the tide and time left them, quiet, heavy, and still. And just as the gondolier must learn to read the shifting surface, so too must the seeker of these treasures learn to work with the currents, to wait for the water to clear, to understand that the lagoon will reveal what it chooses, and nothing more. The Doge of Venice was never simply a man. He was a symbol, a living emblem of the Republic itself. His days were shaped less by personal preference and more by tradition, ceremony, and the quiet machinery of state. Imagine the Doge waking in the early light that filters through the high windows of the Doge's palace. The air is cool, carrying the faint scent of the lagoon. Servants move softly through the corridors, their footsteps muted by marble and woven rugs. Before him lies a day planned almost to the minute, each moment serving a purpose: to maintain the dignity of his position, and to remind all who see him that the Republic endures. The morning might begin with an audience, foreign envoys arriving in embroidered robes, speaking carefully chosen words through interpreters. The Doge listens, nodding at the appropriate moments, his own replies equally measured, a smile that is polite but restrained, the slightest tilt of the head to acknowledge a gift or an offer of alliance. Afterward, there could be a procession across the Piazza San Marco. The Doge would move slowly, flanked by attendants in crimson and gold, the sunlight catching the edges of his stiff ceremonial cap. Citizens would pause in their errands to watch, not because they expected him to speak, but because his presence itself was a reassurance. The familiar figure who had walked these same stones day after day, year after year. By midday, he might retire to one of the palace chambers for private discussions. Here, the true business of Venice unfolded: the allocation of trade privileges, the handling of disputes between merchant families, the quiet weighing of reports from spies and informants scattered across Europe and the Mediterranean. The Doge spoke less than others in these meetings, for his role was not to dominate the conversation, but to guide it, to keep it within the boundaries set by law and tradition. A light meal would follow, often modest, more for sustenance than pleasure. Dried figs, a slice of bread, perhaps fish preserved in oil. The Doge's life, despite the grandeur of his surroundings, was not one of personal excess. The palace was richly decorated, yet its occupant lived almost like a custodian, guarding the treasures of the state rather than indulging in them. In the afternoon, he might receive Venetian nobles in the shaded loggias of the palace, the breeze from the lagoon stirring the silken banners overhead. They would speak in careful tones, sharing news of trade routes, of families joined by marriage, of subtle shifts in the fortunes of rival cities. Each conversation was a thread, and the Doge was tasked with keeping the tapestry of Venice intact. Later still, he might walk in the palace gardens, where gravel paths wound between citrus trees and flowering shrubs. These walks were as much a form of diplomacy as the audiences and councils. Here, the Doge could speak quietly to a trusted ally, away from the echoing chambers of the state. The gardens were also a place of reflection, where the hum of the city beyond the walls seemed softened by the rustle of leaves and the distant call of gulls. As evening drew in, candles were lit in the high halls. Perhaps there would be a concert, or a formal dinner with visiting dignitaries, the silverware gleaming under the flicker of flame. The Doge would raise his glass at the appropriate moments, his words few, his presence enough, and when the guests had departed, He would retire once more to his private rooms. The sound of the lagoon at night would drift through the windows, a gentle lapping against the stone, the faint creak of moored boats. It was in these quiet moments that the Doge, still robed in state garments, might finally allow himself to be simply a man, before tomorrow required him to become a symbol again. The Venice of the 18th century was a city balanced between splendor and decline. Its canals carried both the weight of history and the quiet rhythm of daily life. We have drifted through its waters with the gondolier, feeling the ache of long hours under gray skies. We have stepped into the masked revelry of the last great carnival, where laughter and whispers mingled in candlelight. We have descended into the still, shadowed world beneath the lagoon, brushing against the treasures and fragments left behind by centuries. And we have walked beside the Doge himself, whose every day was an act of ritual, service, and careful restraint. Now imagine the city at night. The narrow streets are hushed, save for the gentle murmur of water against stone. A lantern sways on the prow of a boat gliding silently through a back canal, its light stretching in long ripples across the surface. Somewhere in the distance, a clock tower marks the passing of another hour, its chimes soft and slow. The palaces, the churches, the bridges, they stand as they have for centuries, their reflections trembling faintly in the water. The same breeze that once carried the sound of festival music now stirs the curtains in quiet rooms. Venice does not sleep in the way other cities do. It rests in layers, the surface calm, the depths holding the weight of its long, intricate past. As you return from this journey, you can leave behind the chill of the lagoon, the echo of masked laughter, the measured steps of the Doge. The present waits for you, lighter and safer than the world you've just visited. And in that contrast lies a kind of comfort, the knowledge that the struggles, the intrigues, and the burdens of those centuries are far away now, preserved only in memory and story. You might let your mind wander one last time through the misty canals, watching the light fade until the city becomes only the faint outline of towers and domes against the night sky. And when even that fades, you will be left with nothing but the gentle sound of water, a rhythm that has rocked Venice to sleep for hundreds of years. Welcome. Tonight, we will step quietly into the shadowed corridors of royal power, where gilded feasts hid whispered fears, and even the simplest sip of wine could carry the weight of life or death. We begin with the men and women whose task was as simple as it was perilous. Those who dined before kings, not as honored guests, but as living shields against poison. From there, we will follow a trail of suspicion and intrigue, pausing at a Roman banquet where an emperor's last meal has puzzled historians for centuries. We will turn over the cold metal of Renaissance poison rings, the hidden compartments as discreet as a breath, and we will finally wander into the roaring kitchens of Tudor England, where food for the court was prepared in a world of heat, noise, and relentless pressure. But for now, set aside the rush of your own day. Imagine the slow rhythm of footsteps along a stone hallway. Hear the muted clink of silver platters being arranged, far ahead in the banquet hall. We are about to sit down, not as honored guests, but as those who taste before the king. Imagine waking each morning knowing that your first task might be your last. You rise before dawn, dress in plain but neat garments, and step out into the chill of the palace corridors. Servants are already moving like quiet currents through the building, carrying bread, pitchers of wine, baskets of herbs, and heavy trays. But your path leads directly toward the royal kitchens. As a royal food taster, your duty is clear. Every dish, every drink intended for the monarch must pass your lips before it reaches theirs. The theory is simple. If the meal is poisoned, you will suffer first, giving the sovereign time to survive. The reality is more complicated. For one thing, the threat is not constant, but it is always possible. Some days pass without a flicker of worry, while on others you might notice the cook's hands trembling as he places a platter before you. Your work is public enough to be seen, but private enough to be lonely. Few speak to you in more than short, polite phrases. Some avoid your eyes entirely, as though you are a man or woman, already half in the grave. The process begins hours before the royal meal. You stand by as ingredients are brought in from the storerooms, watching for anything unusual. In some courts, the taster must taste the ingredients themselves: flour, sugar, wine, and even salt before they are used. In others, only the finished dish matters. When the meal is prepared, you are summoned to a small table, often in a side chamber near the banquet hall. Here, there is no enjoyment in the act of eating. You take a small bite, chew, swallow, and wait. Sometimes, it is only a few seconds before the next bite. Sometimes, several minutes. Your eyes might glance toward a window, measuring how much daylight passes before you are deemed safe enough to let the dish continue to the monarch's table. It is a strange way to live, tasting fine delicacies without savoring them, sipping rare wines without appreciating their fragrance, because each swallow carries the faint question, was this the one? And though you try to carry on with calm detachment, the body has its own reactions. You might feel the prickling heat of anxiety after swallowing, even if you know the food is safe. You might notice every tiny change in your heartbeat, every twist of your stomach. Over time, some tasters learn to ignore these phantom alarms. Others never quite did. The position was not always voluntary. In some courts, a trusted servant might be promoted or compelled into the role. In others, it was a position of honor given to a courtier of noble rank, a symbol of loyalty and service. But whether you were born into privilege or raised from the kitchens, the risk was the same. And yet, there were benefits. A taster lived close to the heart of royal power, privy to moments others could only guess at. While tasting, you might overhear the conversations of stewards and guards, learn which foreign guests were expected, or catch the whispered concerns of the chief cook. In a way, you became part of the palace's nervous system, alert to danger before anyone else, but always one step from disaster. Still, no matter how careful the tasting, the job was never foolproof. A slow-acting poison might slip past your guard, harming the sovereign hours later. Or an assassin might target the taster themselves, removing the obstacle entirely. This knowledge sat quietly in your mind, as persistent as the ticking of a clock. It was a role of constant vigilance, of measured bites and carefully hidden unease. A role in which survival was the truest sign of success. And as we move forward, we will see that in history, even the most vigilant food taster could not always prevent tragedy. Segment 2. The Death of Emperor Claudius. It is the year 54 CE. Rome is at the height of its imperial splendor, its marble temples gleaming in the Mediterranean sun, its senators wrapped in fine togas as they pass between the Forum and the Palatine Hill. And in the heart of the imperial palace, Emperor Claudius prepares to dine. By this time, Claudius is no young man. He has ruled for nearly 13 years, a reign that began almost by accident after the assassination of his nephew, Caligula. At first, many underestimated him. Some whispered that he was weak, slow, and unfit to lead. But Claudius proved more capable than they expected, expanding Rome's territory, reforming its laws, and overseeing vast public works. Still, the court in which he lived was never free of danger. Rome was a place where power was both coveted and fragile, where enemies might be hidden in plain sight. And for an emperor, every meal was a moment of trust. On this day, the dish that would become famous in history was simple enough: mushrooms. The Roman elite considered them a delicacy, and Claudius enjoyed them greatly. According to some ancient accounts, the mushrooms were prepared and served by his wife, Agrippina the Younger, a woman of striking ambition and political skill. What happened next remains one of history's enduring questions. Some sources, like the historian Suetonius, suggest that the mushrooms were laced with poison, delivered by the hand, or at least under the orders, of Agrippina herself. Others hint that it may have been the imperial cook who slipped the fatal ingredient into the dish. In these accounts, Claudius consumed the mushrooms without suspicion. His food taster, if present, either failed to detect the danger or was bypassed entirely. The symptoms, they say, came swiftly: a sudden illness, weakness, and confusion. Physicians were summoned, but some historians believe their treatments may have only worsened his condition, whether through ignorance or intent. Other scholars questioned the story altogether. Perhaps Claudius suffered not from poison, but from a natural illness. Mushrooms, after all, could be dangerous even without human interference. Some varieties were toxic enough to cause fatal reactions, and in the 1st century, identifying the safe from the deadly was not an exact science. Whatever the truth, Claudius did not recover. He died during the night, and the throne passed to his stepson Nero, Agrippina, as Nero's mother, became one of the most powerful figures in the empire. For the Romans, the tale of Claudius's last meal became more than just a record of death. It was a cautionary story about the vulnerability of rulers, the dangers hidden in familiar comforts, and the thin line between hospitality and betrayal. Even now, nearly 2,000 years later, we cannot say with certainty whether the emperor's final bite was an act of assassination or simply a tragic accident. But in the quiet moment before he raised the fork to his lips, Claudius could not have known that history would forever remember the meal. And from Rome's imperial halls, our path now drifts forward in time to the Italian Renaissance, where danger could be worn on a finger, and death might be concealed within the smallest gesture. Picture a Renaissance banquet hall. The air is warm with the scent of roasted meats, spiced wine, and beeswax candles. Tapestries hang along the walls, softening the sound of conversation, while musicians play a gentle melody on lutes and viols. Nobles in rich silks exchange polite words, their expressions calm, almost bored. Yet beneath the surface, there's always the possibility of danger. In this world, where courtly manners and deadly rivalries coexisted, one of the most discreet tools of assassination was no larger than a coin: the poison ring. A poison ring was a piece of jewelry with a hidden compartment, usually concealed beneath a hinged bezel or behind an ornate setting. At first glance, it might appear to be nothing more than an extravagant ornament, perhaps set with a gemstone or engraved with a family crest. But with the smallest movement of the wearer's hand, the compartment could be opened to reveal a powder, paste, or liquid lethal enough to end a life in moments. The mechanics were simple yet ingenious. A tiny pin or latch would release the cover. The poison could be discreetly tipped into a drink, sprinkled over food, or even transferred to a surface that an intended victim might touch before eating. Many of these rings were crafted by goldsmiths in Florence, Venice, and other wealthy cities of Italy, places where art and technology often served the ambitions of the powerful. Such rings were not merely the tools of shadowy assassins. There are accounts of nobles keeping one for self-defense. The poison intended for themselves should capture or humiliation be unavoidable. Some Renaissance physicians even carried similar compartments, though in their case, the contents might be medicinal powders instead of toxins. Still, in an age when the line between medicine and poison was dangerously thin, intentions could be easily misunderstood. One of the most enduring legends connects poison rings with the Borgias, Rodrigo Borgia, who became Pope Alexander VI, and his infamous children, Cesare and Lucrezia. While historians debate the accuracy of these tales, popular stories claim they used poison rings to eliminate rivals during elaborate banquets, raising their goblets in friendship while sealing an enemy's fate. The truth is likely less theatrical, but no less unsettling. Whether in Italy, France, or the Ottoman court, the mere suspicion that a person possessed such a ring was enough to inspire caution or fear among their peers. The knowledge that a deadly powder could be delivered in the blink of an eye created an atmosphere where trust was fragile and appearances could deceive. Imagine yourself in such a hall, smiling politely, lifting a goblet, wondering whether the hand offering you wine wears a jewel that glints just a little too deliberately in the candlelight. And yet, amid this quiet tension, life in the palace kitchens continued with its own rhythm, where hundreds of servants labored over immense fires, where vast tables groaned under the weight of roasts and pastries, and where the work was relentless, no matter the hour. Picture the early morning at Hampton Court Palace in the 16th century. A soft mist lingers over the Thames, the air faintly scented with damp reeds and wood smoke. Inside the sprawling kitchens of King Henry VIII's court, the day begins long before the king himself stirs. The great kitchen is not a single room, but a complex of them, more than 50 interconnected spaces devoted to different purposes. There is the boiling house, the pastry room, the roasting room, the pantry, and the buttery. Each chamber has its own heat, its own smells, its own steady rhythm of work. The largest of these spaces hums with quiet industry. Men and boys in simple linen shirts move deliberately, carrying heavy cuts of meat, stacking firewood, fetching water from great casks. The fire pits are already glowing with embers, the heat building steadily until the enormous spits can begin to turn. In the roasting room alone, oxen, boars, and geese will rotate slowly before open flames, their surfaces brushed with herbs and vinegar to keep them from drying. The air is warm, almost uncomfortably so, but those working here have long since adapted to the constant heat. In the pastry room, the atmosphere is cooler. Here, the work is slower, more precise. Pastry cooks roll out the dough on wooden tables, shaping it into pies large enough to feed dozens, each crust stamped with a decorative pattern. Some pies will be filled with venison, others with eels or sweetened fruits, depending on the season and the king's taste that day. The kitchen staff is vast, nearly 200 people in total. There are yeomen who oversee specific areas, grooms who carry out their instructions, and young boys known as turnbroches, whose only task is to keep the meat turning at the right speed. Most of these workers will never meet the king. Their lives exist entirely in this hidden world of firelight, smoke, and the steady rhythm of preparation. Food does not simply appear at the king's table. It travels through a carefully choreographed system. Once the dishes are finished, they are carried through long passages to the great hall or to the more private dining chambers. Footmen in fine livery deliver the platters, and by the time the king lifts his fork, the labor of dozens has already been invested in that single bite. Despite the grandeur of the meals, life for the kitchen workers is unchanging. The hours are long, the work physically exhausting, yet there is also a strange stability to it, a rhythm that repeats each day, following the seasons and the royal calendar. The sound of the spit turning, the scent of wood smoke, the faint clatter of knives on chopping boards, these are constants in a world where politics and favor can change in a moment. And somewhere, in a small antechamber far from the heat, the royal food taster sits, waiting. The dishes will pass before them first, a quiet reminder that even in the heart of the king's own palace, safety can never be taken for granted. And so, we come to the end of this quiet journey through history's kitchens, banquet halls, and shadowed corners, places where food has been far more than nourishment. We began among the royal food tasters, those watchful figures who lived each day between duty and danger, their palates sharpened not for pleasure, but for survival. We moved to Rome, where Emperor Claudius's final meal left behind one of history's most lingering questions. We stepped softly through the Renaissance, where rings might hold tiny, lethal secrets, objects that blurred the line between elegance and threat. And we found ourselves in the Tudor kitchens, vast and glowing with firelight, where the labor of hundreds fed the appetites of kings.